Um, Bom dia a todos. Obrigado pela vossa presença neste webinar. É no primeiro webinar que vamos realizar do Adobe Substance 3D, que é o conjunto de aplicações da Adobe para criar conteúdo 3D. Neste webinar vamos ter a apresentar mais uma vez o especialista da Adobe, Bart, que já nos tem ajudado com outros webinars, e vai ser aqui a primeira introdução no mercado português desta solução. Esperamos que seja algo útil para vocês. Se tiverem alguma dúvida durante a apresentação, podem colocar no chat, que nós vamos ajudando com as respostas à medida do webinar, ou se quiserem podem aguardar pelo fim, em que nós fazemos unmute a todos, e se quiserem podem colocar a dúvida diretamente. Este webinar também vai ser gravado e vamos enviar depois também para vocês a gravação e disponibilizá-la também no nosso canal do YouTube. Bart, thank you again for helping us with these webinars. We really appreciate it. So I will stop sharing and you can start.
Excellent. That's great. Let me just start to share my screen here. Oh, there we go. Let's click. And excellent. Well, a very good morning, everyone. And thank you so much for joining. So my name is Bart Van de Wiele. I manage the pre-sales consulting team within Adobe. And today we're going to talk about Adobe Substance 3D. So this presentation is going to take roughly, let's say 45 minutes. The majority of the presentation is going to be hands-on demo, but I am going to start by opening up with just a couple of slides. So let me just quickly go ahead and go into full screen mode, and let's get started. Now, keep in mind that if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. I cannot see the chat box while I am sharing my screen. You can put your questions in there, either in Portuguese or English. So we'll make sure that all of your questions are answered by the end of this session. So let's talk about Substance 3D here for a second. So what is Adobe Substance 3D in the first place? So Substance 3D is a suite of applications, 3D applications, 4 in total, that has been made available by Adobe. Substance 3D is not a Creative Cloud product. It's not included within the Creative Cloud suite. There's a separate suite of products here that specializes in 3D materials and staging. So the images that you see here on screen, all 3 of them, in this case, examples of packaging, have all been created by using Substance. Now, let's go through the 4 applications just to kind of get you acquainted with the world of Substance. The first one is Substance 3D Stager. So Stager is a tool that allows you to create a 3D scene, import existing objects, if you want, add materials, lighting, cameras, and then you render the scene. So basically, this is a tool that allows you to work in a 3D space and you set up your own little 3D scene. You stage it. That's why we name it Stager. Now, this is very, very similar to what you had before within Adobe Creative Cloud, within Adobe Dimension. Note that Stager is the next stage, no pun intended, where we do have a lot of additional functionality that goes well beyond what Dimension's capabilities are. And when you build materials and 3D objects using the other Substance products, you can import those directly into Stager and then render out a final scene. Now, I have to say, Stager is fairly easy to get started with. So even if you have no experience in 3D, a lot of this is just dragging and dropping. You drag and drop in objects, you drag and drop in materials, lights, cameras, and you can have a professional looking scene here. It is a lot of fun to experiment with, and there are a lot of links between Substance 3D Stager and Adobe Creative Cloud because you can use the Creative Cloud libraries, so you can pass around assets from Photoshop, you can use artboards from Illustrator. There are a lot of links between Creative Cloud and Stager. The second one is Substance 3D Painter. Painter is a 3D painting application. So this means that you would start out with an existing 3D model, okay? And then you would apply textures and materials to that model and to its individual parts, and then use Painter's unique 3D painting capabilities for adding more gradual textures and details into the 3D scene. Once your little 3D scene or your little object is painted and ready, you can then choose to import that object into either Stager, which I've just discussed, or you can even go beyond that and import that into existing 3D applications like Cinema 4D, 3D Studio Max, Rhino, Maya, you name it. So it's Substance, the entire Substance suite integrates very well with the majority of all of the 3D market standard applications out there. So again, Stager doesn't create objects. Painter does not create objects. Substance, in essence, focuses and specializes in 3D materials and textures. And so Substance has been doing this for the last 10 years. The next one is Substance Sampler. Again, a very easy to learn application. Substance Sampler enables you to start out with an existing picture and then convert the texture in that picture into a 3D material. So you import, let's say, in the example you see here on screen, when you import a picture of a brick wall, you can apply various filters to that, enabling you to have a 3D bump mapping, and other types of texture materials here applied to that object here. And then once you have that material ready, you can import that into, for example, Painter and Stager. So again, a pretty low learning curve for this. And then we've got Substance Designer. Now, Substance Designer is the only app in the Substance suite that does enable you to create or design objects. Now, it's not really a sculpting tool like you would have with other 3D applications. It is something that uses nodes, which are like these little lines that you see here in the presentation, here in the screenshot. And basically, by creating and connecting all these different nodes together, you can create unique 3D materials or objects which are all parametric. Now, parametric means that you can basically add different parameters to all the different settings of these 3D objects and of, for example, the materials that you have. I'll show you an example of how parametric materials work, but this is the unique differentiator when you're using Substance. Now, let's move on to the next slide here. If we take a look here at the last set of things that you can add, for example, Substance 3D Assets. So Substance 3D Assets is a database of textures, objects, lighting conditions, everything you need to build your 3D scene. Now, just to give you an example of a parametric material, the architecture material that you see here, which is animated right now, this is or can be one and the same material. So let's say you have a Windows material that you apply to a shape like a big cube or a big rectangle, and then you get to set the amount of windows, the amount of spacing. You can set all of these different options, the width, the height, the depth, the windowsill, the textures. You can set all those different parameters in that same material to create a unique set of windows for your 3D scene. And it's all coming from the exact same material. That's why we say materials are parametric. So basically, you can grab all these assets from the Substance Assets database to get started. Obviously, if you're working on actual genuine product development and product design, your 3D object would come from other software like CAD software, where the object is developed in 3D and can then be imported back into the Substance suite for further development and texturing. Now, where and how do we use Substance here? So first of all, Substance is a set of tools that integrate, like I said, very well with the industry standard 3D tools. For example, Maya, Cinema 4D, 3D Studio Max, and others. So this means that Substance is actively used in basically, well, virtually anything you see in 3D. So big Hollywood productions, computer gaming, the entertainment industry in general. And so obviously getting the results that you see here on screen, like, the T-Rex, it does require you to be an actual professional here. So professionals would use Substance mainly for building the materials, building the textures, and then importing them into their existing 3D software. While more beginners of the Substance suite, which is something we like to call 3D aspiring artists, they will normally use textures and use other apps like Stager, which are a bit easier to stage a 3D scene and use dragging and dropping to gradually build up that scene by adding materials and adding lights here. So again, everything you see here was built using Substance. Fashion is also a very important industry for us. So if you look at the endless capabilities and possibilities of using Substance for displaying fashion, apparel, shoes, clothes, anything that has to do with fabric, basically, it's a very, very important use case. Because imagine that you are let's say that you are bringing out a shoe or a t-shirt or a hoodie or any curtains, carpets, it doesn't matter what it is. Obviously, you'll have these available in different models and different colors and different variations, maybe with different textures. So what you can do is you can basically tell Substance to take an object and then apply a series of materials. And if you have an enterprise license, you can even automate this by having the ability of cloud processing these 3D objects and having different varieties based on the materials that you give to the Substance solution. Same thing for product development. So again, the products you see here are all 3D objects, and these are all brought into Substance, Substance Stager, for example, here, where we added all sorts of different materials. So all these photorealistic mockups here is something that Substance really excels at, where you basically present your product in a 3D, well, it's not a 3D scene, it's basically a 3D object in a 2D scene. So the background is usually just a picture, and it will try and recreate the lighting conditions and perspective of that picture. I'll show you how that works in the actual hands-on demo. Now, one of the prime use cases of using Substance, especially for retail, is something we call virtual photography. So virtual photography is basically the process of recreating an actual photography set to present your products to an audience. Now, obviously, regular photography does come with challenges. For example, you have to set up a set. Let's say that you want to take a picture of a shoe, for example. You have to set up the set, you have to set up the lighting conditions and everything else. If I quickly go back to one of my previous slides here, you can see one of those pictures here on the left-hand side. So this picture here, it kind of looks like this here. Everything you need to do just to kind of get that set up and take that picture. Now, obviously, when you take that picture, it will be a picture of that shoe in that particular position, that size, that model, that color in that perspective. And then you have one picture. So what you can do with virtual photography is it will enable you to basically create any version of the shoe in any color, any position, any lighting condition, any variation, and you don't need to set up all of this. You don't have to hire a bunch of people. You don't have to set up a 3D, you don't have to set up in the actual traditional photography scene. So this is really going to increase how you work. For example, if you take what we traditionally have for regular photography, normally we would spend days or even months to work manufacturing the set, doing the actual shoot, doing post-production, and then publishing just for a limited set of pictures. Now, with virtual photography, you can reduce that to a matter of hours. On top of that, you can have unlimited updates and variations. For example, if you have a man's shoe versus a woman's shoe, if you want to rotate the shoe, have different colors, different variations, different finishes, different straps and heels and whatever it might be, you could basically do whatever you want, because once the 3D scene is set up, it's just a matter of playing with the materials and then having a photorealistic render at the end. Now, this is something that is actually a lot more accessible to anyone that is a regular Creative Cloud user than you might think. For example, the first image here, so like let's say the first complexity of this image, is basically just a regular box that you can download from the Substance 3D Assets database, which we then bring into Stager. And what we then apply is just regular Illustrator and Photoshop files here. Obviously, you can also leverage something like Adobe Stock to download existing labels and other things here just to make everything look professional. In a second complexity, like we have here for Ben & Jerry's, and this is a real campaign, by the way, that you see here, it's the exact same thing. We have a 3D shape, which is a Ben & Jerry's ice cream cup, and then we apply materials coming from Illustrator and Photoshop. We add some lighting, we render the final image. So everything you see here, the bowl, the pizza, the counter, everything is just a picture. The only thing that was added here was the Ben & Jerry's cup. I'll talk about that in just a second here. And then we have the third complexity, which is where we are using a combination of both Stager and Painter to add additional details to this 3D object that we would like to display here. So all these different types of pictures here are actually pretty accessible for any designer that knows a little bit about lighting, dragging and dropping a texture, how a mask works, for example. This is actually quite accessible, especially if you have some experience with Photoshop and digital painting. Then you will not really have a lot of issues learning something like Substance Painter. And what's interesting here is that we now really have like an end-to-end solution for for all these key industries. So this is an example just for footwear. So you can just have your initial sketches, for example, here using Photoshop. And I'm going to grab my pen here. So you can have your initial sketching here, for example, by using Illustrator and Photoshop. And you can grab inspiration from any process that you want, including obviously Adobe Stock, where we have over 70,000 free assets available. Modeling, we don't really do modeling, to be honest, with 3D. We are working on a Substance modeler tool at the moment, but that's still available in an alpha version, so that is not really ready for shipping yet. Texturing can be done using Painter, using Photoshop, just applying regular textures and adding all sorts of details. Again, I'll show you how that works in just a couple of minutes here. And then obviously you can use Stager here for setting the 3D scene and then rendering out the final image. On top of that, once you have your final image or you have your 3D scene ready, you can use the imagery in all the regular publishing channels that you were using before. Keep in mind that because we're working with a 3D scene and 3D objects, you can also export your scene as an augmented reality experience, for example, using Adobe Aero. And this is where it gets really interesting, because we have some data that's actually quite interesting. So studies, including Wayfair and Deloitte, basically taught us that if you are selling a product, a retail product, and if you're able to display that product in augmented reality, then the consumer was 11 times more likely to purchase that product, which is amazing. It's 11 times. And also Wayfair said that 3D is 10 times cheaper overall than the cost of traditional imagery. And so again, it does enable you, if you're into retail, for example, to create and help build that next generation of merchandising experience. So again, this is all very, very interesting. Now, also here, when you look at packaging and materials in general, keep in mind that if you are organizing product shoots for your retail or furniture or fashion or whatever it might be, that obviously there's going to be a massive reduction in the samples that you need, okay? Because we will be scanning in all of your samples and all of your textures. If you have a nice looking leather or cotton, you can use professional scanners to scan that in, and then you can reuse those samples directly in 3D and it will be photorealistic. For example, IKEA reduced their use of actual regular real pictures by 75%. So this means that 75% of what you see in the IKEA catalog is a 3D render. This is not the actual object. It's not the chair. It's not the couch. It's all a 3D environment, basically. But this enables them to really, really benefit from using a 3D workflow instead of setting up a scene or living rooms and then having to take actual pictures here. So there are very clear takeaways for this. Now, this is just a quick example of how Ben & Jerry's was using these products here. In this case, this is a quick render. So it's just basically just a matter of placing that shape here in the 3D scene and then hitting the render button. Coca-Cola did the exact same thing. So they basically brought out a brand new alcoholic drink in the United States, and they needed to basically deliver on various marketing assets. And they didn't have the ability to organize traditional photo shoots because of COVID and because of all sorts of restrictions. So they tried to do everything in 3D, and they were absolutely amazed about what they could do with it. So what they did was they came up with over 30 different designs for the packaging in just a matter of days. And they saved an average of $200,000 in traditional photography for this, which is quite amazing. This is what they did. This is just a quick snapshot here. So they were basically using Substance Stager here for creating and placing Illustrator artwork on a can, adding 3D shapes of ice cubes, and then rendering out the campaign, and they could just basically go live. So this, again, this is something that's very, very accessible. Let's talk about coffee, delicious coffee. So these types of ads, for example, are also rendered in 3D. This is not a real cup, it's not real coffee. Now, how do you build something like this? Obviously, this is now modeled and created using regular 3D software, but the textures and materials are all created using Substance. So basically, what you can do is, for example, start out in Illustrator. You can build your own logo, add your little coffee brand, draw a little logo in Illustrator, and then import that into something like Substance here. That you can use this as a watermark, within your packaging, and then you can always add a second logo to your coffee and then update your work directly here. As you can see here, you've got the coffee bean watermark on this packaging. You can apply that now in something like Stager, where you create a 3D scene with a 2D background. You place everything in the right perspective, you render it out, and you have a photorealistic render of the product that you would like to display. And everything you see here on screen just comes out of the libraries that just ship with Substance together. This is another shot here of a 2D versus 3D scene using Substance. And same thing here, it's a bit of a build-up here, how this can be achieved just by adding textures, lighting, and rendering out the final image. Now, in the end, of course, you get these hyper-realistic images. There are two different variations here. And that's kind of the thing, right? Like once you've got everything set up, it's just a matter of basically switching the packaging, changing the color. Everything else will be, will be there. Same perspective, same lighting conditions, same camera, same blur effects, same perspective. Everything will be exactly the same. That's kind of interesting here. Again, a couple of more variations here. And I've got one more shot here for you guys as well, which is about Ben and Jerry. So this is the campaign that they had before and after they actually placed in the ice cream. So this is all in 3D. Now, why did they do this? Well, obviously, I'm stating the obvious here. Ice cream melts. So that's why they had issues taking a regular picture, because the ice cream was always melting. So that's why you can just use something like 3D just to kind of help you through all of this here. Now, just a couple of things here. Substance Teams versus Enterprise. So keep in mind that the products themselves are exactly the same if you buy Teams versus Enterprise. But do know, obviously, that there are regular enterprise advantages, including, federated ID and single sign-on and other IT-related advantages here. But there's one differentiator, actually two differentiators here, if you do get Substance for Enterprise. One is the CAD import option, and the other one is automation. So for CAD import, if you do develop your products in other types of applications, like typical CAD design software, you can then export those objects and then import those directly into Substance when you're using Enterprise. And secondly, if you do want to automate the different versions and flavors of your campaign of your particular object, you can use the automation service that comes with Substance Enterprise as well to automate all those different variations. For example, we know that some of the larger fashion brands that bring out hoodies and t-shirts, etc., just for one model and different sizes, different colors, different variations, they sometimes have hundreds or even thousands of different variations possible based on different materials, different finishing grades, etc. Just look at a shoe. If you have a shoe, you might have different laces, different side texture, different label, different sole, different heel. There are like a million different combinations available based on everything you have in it within your company. So that's something that can be automated today. Now I'm going to hold off for questions for now. I'm just going to end my presentation, and let's watch Substance. I'm going to discard my notes here. So I'm going to just close this here. I'm going to start out by using Substance Sampler for a second. So this is Sampler. I'm going to create a brand new scene here for a second. So Sampler is an app that you can use for building your own 3D materials and textures based on a picture. So I'm going to quickly show you a very quick example or how that works. My computer seems to be acting up a little bit. Let's take another take at this here. So let's create a new file here. I'm using Substance Sampler. So like I said before, we can transform pictures into 3D materials. So I'm quickly going to go ahead and just go into my desktop here, and I'm going to go into my downloads. So I took a regular picture this morning from Adobe stock, and it's just a regular cobblestone picture. So imagine that I see a picture of something I really like, and I want to use this in my 3D scene. Or for example, I want to create a video game, like a PlayStation game, and I want to use that as a material in my 3D scene. So what you do is you drag and drop of the image, and this is what I have now. Okay, so this is now the image of that cobblestone and has repeated this as a pattern, and it enables me to now work on this as an actual 3D texture, which is kind of cool because this means I can do various things here. So I can, for example, say that I can add a layer. Let me add some moss to this. I'm going to add the moss filter. And it basically detected all the seams in this picture, which is now a 3D material, because it has an intelligent way of analyzing where all the bumps are in this particular scene. So if I basically reduce the amount of moss here in my scene, you're going to see that this only grows in the seams of the actual tiles, which is something, or the actual cobblestones, which is something that's actually quite interesting. And so based on that, you can basically continue to work on this in 3D and then export this to, let's say, for example, your Unreal applications or whatever it might be that you might be using for creating your 3D scenes here. Let's create another example here. So new project. I'm not going to save this here. So let's say that we're building a larger project. And what I've done is I've actually gone ahead and I have taken a logo in Illustrator. And I've taken this logo. It looks like this here. It's a PNG logo. It's like a badge that you can kind of stitch on clothing or other things here. And what I can do is I would like to have this as a stitched version so I can use this as a 3D shape. And I'm going to take this PNG file, and again, I'm going to drag and drop this on here. I'm going to use this as a bitmap this time. I'll choose import. And now based on this, you're going to see that this is just a regular logo that I have imported here. And I'm going to apply an embroidery filter to this. So I basically want to achieve the effect that my logo was stitched. And you can see that's going to apply this now in 3D. So I have a stitched version of my logo now. Now what's kind of cool is you can basically go ahead and you can change the scale of all different threads, for example. And you can even go ahead and you can change the color of all of the individual threads here as well. You can have all sorts of variations. I can have a linear pattern, for example, that's being applied, or I can, for example, have a square pattern for the stitching effect, for example. And you basically have like this little 3D patch now that I can go ahead and play around with here. And again, this comes from Adobe Illustrator. And so basically, based on all these different settings, we can go ahead and have like our own little version of this embroidery. For example, this is one color, but I could go ahead and maybe add like another color here and then play around with all the different settings. Now, when you have built something like this, so you've built a material, which is now just being projected onto a rectangle here, when you have something like this, you can go ahead and you can export this as a substance material. And this means you can reuse the material in other applications. So I'm going to go ahead and close this app. I'm going to close Sampler, and I'm going to take a look here at Painter. So what happens is once you build a material, you can actually use this in your own scene. So for example, I'm working on a scene here, which has a 3D roller skate. It's going to load in my file. This is what it looks like now. This is my roller skate. So I already gone ahead and I dragged and dropped in all sorts of different materials here onto the roller skate itself. Now, where did I get the roller skate? Well, you have a lot of different options available. For example, if I were to go to the Substance asset webpage, you'll see that when you're logged in, you have a membership to Substance, you have access to like this almost unending database of 3D objects and materials. So this means that from here, you can basically look at not just parametric materials, but you also have access to all sorts of different objects you can download directly as well. For example, let's say, for example, I'm looking for a backpack for my next campaign, or a hammer, or whatever it might be. We have all this here in a database, a 3D database. Now, what's also interesting is that if you take a look at some of the different materials that we have here, so there's a lot of variation that you can basically set. So the material as is, it's interesting, it looks really cool, but the thing is, we don't want to use the exact same copy of this material. And that's why, as I explained before, all these materials are what we call parametric. So what happens is when you click a material, I'm gonna click this one here. It's like this painted wooden floor here. You can basically simulate what it looks like. So you have like the paint still on here, etc. It's peeled off, and we have a web player option. So basically, the web player option within Substance Assets enables me to basically play around with all the different options available to me in that parametric material before choosing to purchase or download this material for my project. So for example, here are a couple of presets that were already in the material on its own. So I can basically click that to have different versions. And this is all the same material, basically. And the cool thing is that you can basically take a look here at all of these different settings. This is why we call it parametric. You can change anything, any color. Let's add some more planks. Let's increase the tilt amount of the planks as well, just to make it pop out a little bit more. See, like this, for example. I can change luminosity. I can have a hue shift to change the colors. So I have all these different variations available to me to personalize my material before I decide to actually download it. That's really cool. And obviously, these are the same materials and the same options I'll have available the moment you import that into your 3D application. Now, let's get going here. So I've got some materials already added here to the bottom of my roller skate. So how do you do this? I'm just going to go ahead and just delete a couple here. So for example, if I were to go ahead and just delete these materials, you'll see that I now expose the base object itself. This is like a clay model. So how do we basically apply materials here? So what you do is you basically search the database that we have here, or you create or download your own materials, and you just basically drag and drop the materials on here. For example, if I were to go ahead and choose something like, let's say, steel dark, like a dark steel, I'm going to go ahead and just apply this here. Obviously, this is way too much steel. This is not going to be a very comfortable ride here. So what I can do is I can go ahead and now take a look at the mask here. And I'm just going to go ahead and just deselect everything for a second. There we go. And I'm just going to apply that steel to the base of the roller skate for a second. See? Now let's try this again. I'm going to try and find another one here. So I'm looking for a silver, some type of a silver armor here for the bolts. Again, same thing. I'm just going to apply this here. And I'm going to click this category. There, it looks a lot better. I'm going to apply this here again. Same thing. Let's go into the masking mode, and I'm going to deselect these options here, but I am going to select these, and I want this to be applied to the bolts and nuts as well, and maybe here and maybe there. I'm not an expert on roller skates, I have to say, but I think I am doing a fairly good job on this. Yes, okay, cool. I think I applied it everywhere I want to apply this material here. It kind of looks pretty good, basically. Let's try this again. Let's add some plastic. So I'm going to type in plastic, plastic, but it needs to be like a used plastic. So it should be a bit rougher. I'm going to try, let's take this one for a second. There we go. And same thing here. I'm going to click this, click the mask options. I'm going to deselect everything and deselect everything. And I'm just going to click the wheels, wheel, and maybe this as well. I believe this has the same color as the wheels. There we go. Let's go back. And now, oh, I forgot to add the little, there you go, the stopper as well. How could I? So basically, this is now what it looks like. And now based on these materials, I can expand these different layers, just like you would in Photoshop. And I can go ahead and expose certain parameters, like, for example, the base color. So I can maybe say, you know what, I need this base color to be, let's say, this color or something else here. So that's basically how you apply basic materials here on using Substance Painter. But obviously it's called Substance Painter. So it should do something that's unique, because just dragging and dropping materials, I can do this using Stager as well. So why am I using Painter? The reason I'm using Painter is because I can do a lot more with this. For example, what if I were to try and find a rust material, and I'm going to apply a rust material here because I want these skates to be a bit worn out here. So I'm going to go ahead and just use regular rust. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a mask to this. So I'm going to make sure that we do not apply this to the wheels, no rust on the wheels, no rust on the stopper, and also no rust here. Everything else can be a bit rusty. It's a bit too much, obviously, but that's fine. Just bear with me here. And I'm going to go ahead now, and I'm going to add a black mask as well. And then I'm going to add something that's called a generator. I'm going to click here. I'm going to add a generator. And for the generator, I'm going to add a mask. Oh, there we go. I need to have a mask option here. So I'm going to add the mask editor. There we go. And now what you'll see is I can now have control over the amount of rust on these materials. So I'm going to quickly increase this for a second here. So you can see that the rust only grows around the edges of the actual shape here. And this is because Painter has a very intelligent way of analyzing the physical shape of a 3D object. So it knows if rust were to occur, where this would occur a lot more. And this is very often at the edges of the actual 3D shape here. Same thing here, there's actually a lot of rust here. And I have like this endless supply of sliders that I can use now just to kind of play around with the rust settings. And I'm just gonna do it a little bit like this here. So it's not really very, very rusted, but just kind of worn out enough, okay? Now let's move on here to another layer. I'm going to add a paint layer. This is Substance Painter after all. And I am going to click here and I'm going to try and find if I can find some dirt. So the thing is, if you look at dirt brushes here, what happens is you sometimes encounter Photoshop icons. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can see, like there's a Photoshop icon here, and there are Photoshop icons here. These are actual Photoshop brushes, so ABR brushes. You can reuse all of these here inside of Painter, which is kind of cool. And I'm just going to go ahead and add some dirt. So I'm going to choose a dirt brush. I can actually test this here. I'm going to go ahead and maybe choose a different color for this, so different base color, maybe a bit like so, a bit dirty. There we go, not too bad. And what we do now is just going to go ahead and just paint in 3D. I'm going to go ahead and just add, oh, undo this here. I'm just going to go ahead and just add some dirt here to the wheels. Same thing, zoom out a little bit out here. So I'm doing this all in 3D. Obviously, there will be dirt here at the bottom as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and lower the opacity a little bit. And I'm going to change the size of my brush. I'm going to add a bit of dirt here at the center here of the wheel as well. And maybe there should be some dirt here because obviously this is the stopper. I'm going to increase the brush size a little bit more here. And what you can do is if you want this to be repeated on the other side, you can always go ahead and click the symmetry option, which means that anything I add now here, like this, will also be added here on this end of the actual part of the roller skate. Now, this is how you basically use something like 3D brushes just to add basic dirt. So what I can do now as well is maybe look at the upper side of my shoe and, well, roller skate. And I'm going to add another layer here. And I'm going to try and find some stitches. So I need to add some stitches here. So obviously I need to add some basic stitches, and the base color should be a bit lighter. And I need to add some stitches. Let's say, for example, here at the front, like there should be stitches going from the top to the bottom. And using the stitch brush tool basically enables me to just drag and drop in stitches just by painting them. Like so, for example, and some more stitches here, like so. Oh, a bit too much, but that's fine. I can always erase them later, which I don't have the time for today. And basically, you can just add these 3D stitches here, which is kind of cool. So I'm going to do this here at the other side as well. I'm going to focus on this area. I'm going to press the Shift key. I'm going to see if I can just quickly stitch that. Oh. I'm doing this really quickly, people, okay? So please bear with me. Obviously, I would give this a lot more love and attention if this was a serious project, but it does enable me just to kind of, add as many stitches as I want, right? I can just go ahead and maybe add a stitch line here. I'm doing this with a mouse on a laptop. Obviously, I could use a drawing tablet as well, but basically you kind of get the idea that you can add all sorts of 3D stitches, zippers, and anything else that you might like. Now, as you might remember, using Sampler, I created a logo that was embroidered here. So what I can do now is I can go ahead, I can go and fetch that particular logo here. So I'm going to go ahead and go into my desktop, and I am going to take the exported version of that embroidered logo, and I am going to import that here into my scene. Here it is. I'm going to drag and drop this here at the top of my roller skate, which gives me this effect, which doesn't really look like anything right now. And what I can do is I'm going to click this, and I'm going to take a look here at some of these options. This should be a planar projection. And I am also going to use this tool just to kind of drag and drop this in its location. There we go. It's a bit big, so I might actually scale this down. And I'm going to scale this, oops. I'm going to scale this down. So a bit like this here. There we go. So I've got the stitched version of my Illustrator logo. And I also need to make sure that I don't repeat the logo. And there is a bit of a transparency thing happening here as well. So I'm also going to go ahead and channel mapping changes to, there we go. This looks a lot more friendly. So now I basically have a embroidered logo that came from Substance Sampler, which came from Illustrator, that I can now use here. It's all stitched up, it's dirty, this is great. So in the meantime, while I'm talking, I am going to launch Stager. So while Stager is launching, just a kind of quick recap here. So what I've done is, we've started here in Substance 3D Assets, where I was able to find a roller skate. We download the roller skate. That's one thing. In Painter, we import the roller skate, and then we import, okay, it's loaded up. Then we import various textures and materials from the database and from Substance Assets, and we drag and drop them here, and we apply them directly here onto the roller skate. Now, luckily for me, this is always parametric, which means that I can always go ahead, and I can take a look at some of these basic materials, and I can just grab materials, and then, for example, make the actual roller skate match the colors I have here of my embroidered logo a lot better. For example, I can go ahead and maybe change the leather color as well based on the embroidery. There we go. And maybe I'll do the same thing for the laces. Same thing, maybe kind of go back into that little color here. It's not half bad, not half bad, people. And so basically, I added these materials here using Painter. Then I used Painter's unique capabilities of adding some dirt in 3D very quickly. Stitches, you can even add damage. I added some rust materials here, some rust textures here to the bottom of the roller skate. And when I'm done, which is what I am now, I can go ahead and choose File, Send to Stager. And now it's going to take my file and it's going to import that file here into Substance Stager, where I can set this as a 3D scene. And so this is basically where everything comes together. So I have my roller skate now. Okay, so it's in here. So, okay, I didn't add the embroidery to this end, but of course I could. And now I can go ahead and present this in a 3D scene here. So what I can do now is just play around with the positioning of the roller skate. Maybe I want to duplicate the roller skate and have like a version here, and the version should be like on its sides, something like this. Oh, it should be a bit more on its side, which is more realistic. There we go. And it could be over here. Oh, sorry, over here. I need the arrow. There we go. Just as a quick product presentation. There we go. It's not too bad. And now we need to basically present this in a way. So we need to basically add a 2D image for this. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to click these options here. I'm going to go ahead and choose any of these images that come with Substance Stager. Obviously, you can import your own images as well. This is not really a problem. Now, what I can do with this here, I can go ahead. I'm going to choose the exterior table, and I'm going to let go. It's going to generate this 2D background. And now I am going to click the Match Image option, which is going to do a couple things here. It's going to match perspective, create lights for me, and it's also going to set a new camera for me. I'm going to click OK. And see, it just fixed perspective for me. It did this automatically. It's all based on AI. And now it's generating all the lighting conditions for me to match the lighting in the picture. And this is actually not too bad. I might actually go back into the environment settings, and I might look at the lights, and I'm going to change the couple of these options. If I click here, I'm going to change the temperature of the light just to make it a bit more sunny that day, something like this here. If I then go ahead and maybe click the ray tracing option just to quickly render the shadows as well as a preview, you will see that this now really gives me a better version of this particular image here. And this is basically what you do to render everything out and have it as a 3D scene. Now, obviously, what you can also do is you can always go ahead and then drag and drop in, for example, different labels. You can drag in Illustrator files if you want to. That is not really a problem. So, for example, nothing is really stopping me from, for example, I'm going to take the other one here. For example, let's take a look here, bearing the brackets, the nuts, no. Let's take the upper, yeah, let's take this side here. So if I wanted to, and now I am messing up my perspective here, I could still go ahead and then try and find, for example, an Illustrator document. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to go in here. So let's say, for example, I've got some patterns in Illustrator. I can always drag and drop patterns if I want to. There we go. And I can always choose to fill that. So this is an Illustrator file here. And because this file is using multiple artboards in Illustrator, I can always go ahead and maybe switch to a different artboard. See? So whatever you do, you can always involve Photoshop files, Illustrator files, switch artboards. Everything's linked, everything's live, or you can even use the Creative Cloud libraries from here as well. So there's a really good connection between both Substance and the Creative Cloud here. Now, what happens is when you end up clicking the render button to create a final image here, let me quickly launch Photoshop for a second, and let me show you what that looks like. So I've gone ahead and I've rendered this shoe image here before. And let me show you what you get in return, because it's not really rendering out as a JPEG. It is rendering out as a Photoshop document. So it is expecting you to do a little bit of post-processing on this particular scene here. So this is the one. So this is the one I did this morning. So it is a very, very similar project here. If I zoom in, you can see like I've got a lot of cool looking details. I've got the depth perspective here. I've got some rust elements here. And what it basically gives you is it gives you these layers as well. I'm going to zoom out. It gives you a material selection mask you can play around with. There's an object selection mask, and it even created a depth map for you, which is really interesting because once you have a depth map, you can go ahead and you can even apply different filters that allow you to use alpha channels. For example, if you were to choose, let's say, lens blur for a second here, then lens blur is going to obviously blur your scene, but you can actually use a depth map from here. So you can actually reuse the information that Substance has dynamically rendered for you. And this is basically it. This is how you render your final scene. And then you basically can go to town and you can publish this at the end. There we have it. Substance assets, sampler, painter, and stager. I didn't show Substance designer. Learning curve is just, it's just too high at the moment, and it's something that's more for the actual 3D specialists today. My understanding today is that all of you are not 3D specialists yet today, so that's why I didn't involve that particular application. I am going to stop sharing my screen for a second and see if we have any questions.
Okay, thank you, Bart. Vou fazer unmute a toda a gente para se quiserem colocar alguma questão. Também podem ir colocando pelo chat, se quiserem. I will unmute everyone, Bart, so if they want to ask something
Sure.
directly. And if someone wants to ask in the chat, they are also allowed.
Yep, please ask your question in Portuguese or English.
Yes. But thank you, Bart. Your presentation was really good. I think, as you always do, like demos, and it's not like just reading at slides. I think it's much better, and it doesn't leave space to many questions because you always demonstrate everything really well.
So. That's good to hear. Thank you so much. So obviously I will share the slide deck with you, Ricardo. So you can all have the slide deck just to kind of read back, which is absolutely fine. Now note that the materials and the objects that I've been showing you here, you can also download these from the Substance webpage for free. So you can all have the exact same experience that I've just done here. We have a ton of tutorials available on the Substance webpage as well. And I know that Substance 3D is not included in your Creative Cloud membership, but you can still get a 7-day free trial just to kind of get your hands dirty on Substance, just to kind of see what it can do for you, okay? Now, obviously, if you have other questions regarding pricing or other things, please have a chat with Ricardo. If there are technical questions, I'm sure those questions will find their way to me via Ricardo as well. And if there's nothing else, well, we're actually at the hour. My apologies for the technical delays I've had before. It does happen to everyone, as you can see, but I do hope that it didn't really kill the vibe of the actual demo. So thank you for being here.
No, thank you, Bart, for presenting. It was a really good presentation. Obrigado a todos os presentes também. O webinar depois vai ser partilhado. Caso tenham alguma dúvida, podem depois encaminhar para mim, que iremos esclarecer Thank you, Bart, once again, and have a nice day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ricardo. Until
Bye
next
bye.
time. Bye-bye.